I'm happy to welcome you to my channel. I hope this story brings you something special and leaves a pleasant impression deep inside you. Oliver Bennett was born in the north of London, in a flat above a pharmacy where the evening smelled of menthol and freshly brewed coffee. He was 27. He worked at a startup that sold smart shoe brushes that counted steps as diligently as banks count money. Oliver's phone had 5 planning apps and not a single one for silence. He wore dark navy shirts with a crisp collar aperture, arrived at meetings on time, laughed easily, and inside he tightened, as if someone had tied a knot long ago and forgotten to untie it. Grandmother Elsie, who lived in York, belonged to a different era and a different tempo. She read a paper newspaper, not a screen, knew the neighbors' names, and remembered how the cafe on the corner used to bake clove buns that warmed your hands like the first letters from your granddad once did. She wrote Oliver letters on cream paper, underlining important words in ink that bled a little, as if the thoughts did not want to fit into the lines. Oliver read them quickly, on the escalator at Oxford Street, between push notifications and cold iced coffee, and put them into a drawer. Later came in November. Elsie passed away quietly, like a lamp going out in a hallway. Not because the lamp was faulty, but because the day had ended. After the funeral in a small church where the stone remembered more names than any server, the solicitor, Mr. Whitaker, called Oliver into his office. On the table lay a flat wooden box with a brass latch and a key tied to a red ribbon. "Your grandmother made an instruction," he said. "Not a legal one, rather a moral one. She didn't leave money. She left a plan." In the box was a soft-covered notebook embossed with the word journal, an Oyster card, several undated rail tickets, a photograph of a narrowboat on a canal, and a short letter. "My dear Olive, you have always run faster than your heart had time to look. I don't want to break your running, only to ask, walk a little. In this journal there are 10 pages. On each one, a place and a task. Complete them in any order by my next spring. If you reach the end, you will open what I have kept for you. Not a win, but a choice. Love, Elsie." Oliver turned the photograph over. A narrow boat with white sides and a dark blue cabin was moored to a wooden pier. On the stern, painted letters read, "Elsie's Star." He grimaced. Canal romance had never been on his KPI list. The first page of the journal: Brixton, allotment, Wednesday. Go to Mrs. Abigail at plot number 12. Ask about her tomatoes. Don't teach. Listen, help for 3 hours. Take one thing she offers you herself. Brixton Old Road smelled fragrant and loud. The market, cobbled together from wooden tables and gaudy signs, hummed as if the city had opened its windows. The allotments, little clumps of earth where Londoners grow their cucumbers and their memories, lay behind a fence opposite the laundrette. Plot number 12 was easy to find, decked with bunting, with a low birdhouse and men's boots stuck on stakes to scare off foxes. Mrs. Abigail turned out to be a slender woman in a pink beret, with eyes that had known both loss and shallots. She did not ask questions. She simply handed him a spade, and for 3 hours Oliver, for the first time in years, felt his body working to a schedule different from his calendar. The soil was wet, dark, and patient. The tomatoes, green beads with a promise. "When my husband died, I thought tomatoes were nonsense," she said. "But then I realized, here I can see a result, even if it's small. And life, son, is made of small results that no one applauds. Your silence should applaud them." She looked at Oliver's hands, clean as an investor deck, and handed him a narrow knife with a worn bone handle. "Take it. Few people understand that cutting should be done kindly. On the tram home, Oliver held the knife carefully in his pocket under his coat, a symbol of a science unknown to him, to cut kindly. The second page, Manchester. St. Bart's Hospital, Friday. Meet Tom Blackwell, the volunteer coordinator. Spend 6 hours in the children's ward. Don't take photos. Tell the truth when they ask why you're here. Tom turned out to be a broad-shouldered man in a jumper with a moose on it. He showed Oliver a room with plastic booths where children built cities from colored blocks that stood better than some corporations. Don't be a hero, Tom warned. Be there. In the corner sat a girl called Grace with dark curls. She was 9. She knew what relapse meant and said the word between 2 sips of apple juice, as if it were a new name for her plush rabbit. "Why are you here?" she asked. "Because my grandmother asked me to," Oliver answered honestly. "Is she old?" She was. Grace nodded as if she understood the difference between is old and was better than any adult. She asked him to draw a boat. Oliver, who could draft in Excel but not on paper, drew a rectangle and 2 waves. "Bad," she said frankly, "but you tried. For that, a present from me." She handed him a small plastic star given out for bravery. When he returned home, he placed the star beside the knife. Blades and stars, to cut and to shine. The third page, York. Northgate Books Bookshop, Saturday. Go to Mrs. May's bookshop. Here's the address. Ask if you can shift the boxes into the back. Don't argue with her rules. Take the scorched book she gives you. The bookshop Northgate Books stood a little away from the tourist path. In the window, portraits of writers looked out as if they knew good jokes. Mrs. May was tiny, with a tightly pulled ponytail and a Yorkshire accent. "Are you from London?" she asked, as if measuring the degree of illness. "Yes." "Well, London needs books, too." Oliver carried boxes and shelved them alphabetically, and the noises in his head suddenly turned into the rustle of pages. At the end, Mrs. May pulled from under the till a scorched book without a cover. The fire was 3 years ago. We kept this one in memory, not of the loss, but of what remained intact. Take it. He brought the book home and opened it. The edges were burned, but the text in the middle had survived. The open spread spoke of how the hero finally stopped being afraid of the dark, because in the dark, the stars are easier to see. He put the book beside the star and the knife, and remembrance became a ritual. The fourth page, Edinburgh. A letter, Sunday. Deliver a letter to Mrs. Fiona McLean. Don't read it. Say, "Thank you for that day in 1964 by the bridge." If she cries, give her 3 minutes of silence. The train to Edinburgh softened all the everyday haste. The city met him with sea air and basalt in the walls. Mrs. Fiona lived on the 3rd floor of a stone building with a view of Forth Road. She was ginger, though grayed, and her eyes looked like 2 blue postage stamps. From Elsie, she asked before he even handed over the envelope. I knew something from her would come one day. She opened the letter, read it, and sat down. Her eyes filled, as if the sea had risen to the windowsill. "Thank you for that day in 1964 by the bridge," Oliver said from memory. Mrs. Fiona nodded and cried silently, and 3 minutes stretched so long that he suddenly understood. Silence is an action too, if you perform it consciously. Then she smiled. "Your grandmother taught me one thing. Don't let your guilt become your home. It always arrives without a suitcase, so that you carry its things yourself. Don't carry them." She gave him a small silver bracelet with a notch. "For yourself, if you forget that you don't have to sink." At home, the bracelet lay beside the knife, the star, and the scorched book. As if someone were collecting a kit not for survival, but for life. The 5th page, Birmingham. Father, Tuesday. Go to your father without warning. Bring him 2 coffees. Don't mention Mum for the first 10 minutes. Say, I don't know the right way, but I want to try. Father lived in a tight brown brick house on a street where Sunday smelled of fried bacon and lawns. They had not talked properly for a long time. They differed about everything, from how to stack the glasses in the cupboard to what it meant to keep up. The door opened, and the surprise on his face was more honest than any instruction. I've brought coffee, Oliver said, and they sat in the kitchen where the clock clicked like a little typewriter. He didn't mention Mum for 10 minutes. They asked about the neighborhood's safety and the new bus routes. On the 11th minute, I don't know the right way, Oliver said, but I want to try. I don't want to be right. I want to be around. Father wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and seemed to get smaller. Then he stood up and brought from the cupboard a little wooden box. This is your old stamp machine. You collected them, remember? You were fascinated by the route an invisible hand uses to carry a letter through cities. I kept it. I thought, one day you'll arrive too. He set the box in his son's hands. The 6th page. Brighton. The sea. Saturday. Spend a day on the beach without your phone. Eat fish and chips and newspaper. Say something good to the person in the queue. About them, not about the weather. The waves beat into a bud of pebbles, and the gulls shrieked as if someone had tried to teach them manners and failed. Oliver ate fish and chips, oil soaking through the newspaper. The Argus, a woman behind him, with a gold chain and an anchor tattoo, waited for her order. You have a wonderful laugh, he said suddenly. It's like oiling the door to a room everyone's afraid to enter. She was surprised, and then laughed loudly, like a bell in a small church. And for some reason, it became easier for Oliver to breathe. The 7th page. Cambridge Bridge, Monday. Sit on the bridge and reread the letters I wrote you. Aloud. Then write me one of your own. Put it into the pocket on the last page. The bridge over the Cam was a place where student blazers aired out lecture dust. Oliver sat on the stone and read his grandmother's letters aloud, softly, as if for the fish in the water. Words grew warmer when spoken, not just swallowed with the eyes. Then he took a pen and wrote, I'm ashamed that I lived like a runner who doesn't even know where the finish is. It hurts that I treated your letters as just another to-read item. I feel good now that I say this out loud. I don't promise to be different. I promise to be here. He tucked the letter into an envelope, stuck on a stamp with a blue bus, and put it into the pocket on the last page of the journal, as Elsie had asked. The 8th page. London. Shelter Charity Shop. Thursday. Give away 3 things you're sorry to part with. Don't give away broken things. Talk with the shop assistant about who buys old coats. Oliver brought 3 things. His first expensive jacket, the headphones that had saved him from the voices of the tube, and a finance book in which he underlined lines as if he earned with them. The shop assistant, a redhead named Amelia, smiled. People buy old coats for different reasons, she said, stacking them on the rail. Some because it's cold. Others because a piece of someone else's story suits them better than a new nameless item. And also, old coats remember the shape of shoulders. That's why they're warm. He stepped out to the street with a light emptiness in his hands. The 9th page. Lake District. Path. Sunday. Walk 10 kilometers. Without music. If you meet someone who is lost, guide them. If not, Ask for directions even if you know where you're going. The path over the hills was wet with fine rain. Oliver walked and listened, not to podcasts, but to the whisper of clay and the creak of his own thoughts. At the 7th kilometer, he met an elderly man in a raincoat, long unfolding a map the way laundry used to be spread by a river. "Could you tell me the turn for Grasmere?" the man asked. "I can walk you there," said Oliver. "I'm going anyway." They spoke about the weather, and about how water knows the road better than people do. At the fork, the old man stopped. "Thank you," he said. "You reminded me that sometimes a map shouldn't be read. It should be lived." The 10th page. Reading. Evening. Friday. Have a meal at the pub The Quiet Lion, and buy a familiar barman an hour off. Let him go for a smoke or the sunshine. Work in his place. Listen to 3 stories and don't give advice. If anyone leaves a tip, pass it to the musician. The barman Josh, with a ring in his ear and a scar on his chin, laughed when he heard the idea. If you want to ruin someone's evening, go on. He winked, and disappeared for an hour. Oliver poured a pint of ale that smelled of apple and a tart, juicy laugh. He listened. A man told how he missed his marriage and didn't regret it. A woman, how her cat with phenomenal intuition saved her day twice. A student, how he feared drowning in his parents' expectations. Oliver nodded and did not advise. In the corner, a guitarist played. Winter chords made summer in the glasses. Oliver passed the tips to the musician, and he only said, "Cheers, mate," and silently adjusted the pegs. When he returned to London, it was late winter. Snow lay in thin pockets on the car roofs along Portobello Road. On the last page of the journal, there was a little sleeve. He slid his letter into it. Beneath it, another envelope from Elsie with a short note and the address of a mooring on the Regent's Canal. "You read wonderfully, Olive, but you live even better. If you've come this far, it's time to open doors, some in your head. Others these." She had placed 2 keys. One for the box he brought from the solicitor. The other, heavier, with a blue plastic key fob in the shape of a star. The mooring was quiet, like a notebook on a Sunday. The canal stretched like a line of poetry between 2 neighborhoods. By berth 23 there stood a narrow boat with white sides. On the stern, Elsie's star. The cabin door opened with a soft squeak, like an old photo album. Inside, wooden benches, a small stove, shelves of books, a kettle with a chipped spout, and an envelope with the solicitor's seal. Officially, this boat is yours, a non-financial asset, as it's fashionable to say. A non-financial heart, as I will say. I know you're not a sailor, and I am not asking you to become one. I ask you, if you feel it, to make of this place something for others, perhaps a floating bookshop, perhaps a small school of writing, perhaps a tea room where silence is sold in cups. Oliver sat on the bench and was silent for a long time, until the kettle reminded him of itself with an elderly whistle. He lit the stove, the wood crackled kindly. On the table lay a small cover of the journal with blank pages. To the left he placed Abigail's knife, Grace's star, Mrs. May's scorched book, and Fiona's bracelet. To the right, the box of stamps from his father. These were his materials, unexpected and proven. In the first week he simply cleaned the boat, polished the brass, and fixed the shelf that always fell at the 2nd volume of Hardy. In the 2nd, he hung a small sign. The Quiet Star, books, tea, conversation. For your time, our silence. He did not know if one is allowed to do this, to turn advice into reality. But Regent's Canal loves experiments. The first customer was an elderly woman with a little dog named Mrs. Hudson. She bought a short novel and sat for half an hour, warming her hands around a cup. Then Amelia from the charity shop came to greet the coats of the past. After her, the musician from the Quiet Lion, who wanted to play for a few passers-by in exchange for tea and biscuits. "No electricity," he said. "Let's keep it honest." The news about the floating bookshop did not spread instantly, but it spread reliably. Someone brought a friend. Someone. A boredom that suddenly calmed in the light of the lamp. One day, Mrs. Abigail came from Brixton with a basket of green tomatoes. "Take them and make chutney. You've got tea. Then chutney fits the theme." Oliver sliced them uncertainly with the knife, kindly, as he had been taught. Another day, Tom from Manchester sent a postcard. "The children drew your boat. We have a copy. You should have the original." And Mrs. May sent a box of books with character, slightly chipped, slightly scented like rain on stone. One morning, when the canal breathed a little mist, a young woman stepped onto the deck. Dark fair hair, a short green jacket, and a gaze in which so many plans had darkened that a second boat could have been opened with them. "I'm Lily," she said. "I write columns for the local paper. I was told you sell silence in cups. How much is it?" "Today, at a discount," Oliver replied. "If you tell me how a paper fits life into 3,000 characters." They laughed and talked. Lily came the next day, and a week later she wrote a column about the boat. In a city where time is money, sometimes someone opens a shop where time is just time. Students from King's Cross began to come, office workers from the city, fishermen from neighboring barges, tourists who forgot they wanted a selfie. They brought their stories, and Oliver carefully stacked them in the drawer where a cash register should have been. Weeks poured into months, and he noticed suddenly that he had stopped wearing a watch. Not because the watch was bad, because he had learned to hear the kettle and footsteps. In spring, on the day when the lilac bushes bloomed by the canal, his father came to the boat. He stood on the bank in his old coat, and you could see the coat remembered his shoulders. "I've come to try your tea," he said. And in those words there was more peace than in all their arguments. They sat on the deck. Father turned the little box of stamps in his hands for a long time. "You know," he said at last, "I always thought fatherhood was about showing the way. Now I see. Sometimes you just have to be a lantern on the shore. Not so the ship returns. So it knows it has a shore." Oliver nodded and put this line away into the same drawer where the other priceless things lay. Grace's star, the scorched book, Fiona's bracelet. One evening, when the sun set so slowly it seemed unwilling to surrender to the next weather forecast, a letter came from Scotland. From Mrs. Fiona. "I went to the bridge. Now I stand here with no suitcase, and I feel light. Tell Elsie—" "Oh, you are telling her anyway, that her gifts work with a delay." On another occasion, Grace came from Manchester with Tom. The girl was tall and laughed with her whole body, not only her mouth. She touched the name Elsie's star and stopped. "May I leave something of mine here?" she asked. "Of course." She stuck a small sticker shaped like a cloud on the cabin door. "For rainy days, so you'll know there are stars behind them." The following winter, the canal slowed like cold blood. There were fewer people, but those who came stayed longer. Lily brought a thermos and 2 pairs of warm mittens. "You see," she said, looking into the dark, "we all hurry somewhere because we fear that space will run out. A place in the sun, a place in the lists. And what brings us back is a place on a bench, and someone beside us. Someone with a kettle," Oliver clarified. They drank tea and were silent, as Elsie had taught. A silence that acted, On the last day of the year, Oliver lifted the lid of the box he had carried from the solicitor and had never opened completely. Inside lay several envelopes, the boat's paperwork, insurance, a maintenance schedule, and a small check. Not astronomical, but enough not to be afraid of the first quarter. And a letter, begun long ago. Olive, if you are opening this, you already know that the main gift is not the check. I knew you would need something so you wouldn't fall through the ice of the first failure. But the main thing, what you hold in your hands, cannot be sold. You will learn not to finish the work. You will learn to continue it. You will learn to place the knife and the star side by side, to cut when it's time to cut away the excess, and to shine when it's time not to go blind. If one day you want to close the boat, close it. But if you open something else, open it the same way. And remember, love is not a gift that lies on a shelf. It's the one you pack every day into simple actions. Your Elsie. He read it, put the sheet back, and blew out the lamp. The glass on the cabin door misted with his breath. On it appeared a clear line of the word further, written by a finger. He smiled. Someone among the visitors had left this unnoticed, like a tip for silence. Spring returned to the city gradually. First flowers on the neighbor's windowsill, then bicycles, then Sunday on the steps down to the water. The Quiet Star received an invitation from the local school to hold an extracurricular reading lesson on board. Children came like gulls to the smell of chips, noisy at first, and after a few minutes, focused. They read aloud and quietly, wrote short letters to a person 50 years from now, and Oliver taught them to listen to pauses. Why pauses? Asked a boy with his hood pulled up as if it was winter for him always. Because without pauses there is no music, Oliver replied. There is only sound. When the children were taken away, he stood for a long time on the deck. The sun made sequins on the water, and it suddenly seemed to him that Elsie was sitting on a bench on the opposite bank, in a coat that remembered her shoulders, and nodding. Not as a judge, but as a witness. That evening, Lily came with a package. She set on the table a small hand-painted tin. "This is a jar of silence," she said. "I give it to people who ask me for words when I know they need pauses." "How much?" "Today, in exchange for a story." He opened it and told his, about Brixton and tomatoes, Manchester and the Star, Edinburgh and the 3 minutes of silence, father and the shore. Lily listened without a recorder and then said, "You know you've already written a novel? It's just not on paper." "I'm working on volume 2. Oliver smiled, pointing at the people stepping on board. "The co-authors don't mind." Lily stayed to help on Saturdays. She arranged books, brewed tea, and sometimes read her columns aloud, about winter markets, about the awkwardness of sincerity, about whether the remaining phone booths need a new use. Oliver listened, and sometimes he laughed so heartily that Mrs. Hudson with her dog looked round. Well, finally. One day Mr. Whitaker the solicitor called. "I have one more small document," he said. "Your grandmother asked me to pass it on no earlier than after you opened the boat, and it had worked for a year." The document was short. Permission to moor at another spot along the canal. "So that," Elsie wrote, "you know, every place has a continuation. Sometimes, 50 meters further." Oliver thanked him and hung on the wall a small plan of the canal, circling in blue pencil his new orbit. He did not feel it as an obligation, rather as an opportunity to be wider than his day. In summer, a young man with a nervous smile came on board. He held a folder of CVs the rain had already dampened. "I'm from Brighton," he said. "My name is Sam. I'm lost. Have a seat, Sam. Tea?" Yes, please, but don't you think I need to decide everything now? And I have no answers to anything. You know, Oliver said, I too thought for a long time that answers are final stops. Now I think they are piers. You can rest on them. And then, off again. You can sit here as long as you need. Then you will go and decide, or you will not decide. That is an answer too. Sam returned a week later, with less rain in his hands. He helped paint the boat's sides. With him came two more, a student who wrote poetry and a pub cook who made unbelievable scones and said, "Butter is just another way to say I love you." At the end of summer, when the days had grown shorter than the queues at Pret, Oliver took all the gifts out of the drawer: the knife, the star, the scorched book, the bracelet, the box of stamps, the jar of silence. He laid them out on the table and looked at how they fell into place. It was a map, but not of the roads printed on official plans. It was his own, with turns toward people, bridges to silence, and islands of kettles. "You've done something big," Lily said when he told her this aloud. "I just stopped running," he answered, "and it turned out my hands had long been numb. Now they are coming back to life." In autumn, a letter arrived from York. Not from the other world, from this one, from Mrs. May. "We have a boy here who won't read aloud. Will you send us your recipe for quiet reading? And we'll send you a box of books about traveling short distances." Oliver wrote, "Start with the kettle," then had 5 minutes of silence. Then a paragraph or two. Then silence. Then a paragraph. Never criticize the pauses. They are part of the text too. Winter came again and went again. On the anniversary of the Quiet Star's opening, Oliver hung a small poster. "Open mic tonight. Bring not a poem but a pause." People laughed, and they brought real pauses. They sat silently for a minute, and then said whatever came to mind. Not everything was beautiful. Not everything wise, but everything was real. By the end of the evening, Oliver took the last blank sheet from Elsie's journal and wrote, "Thank you for teaching me not to collect gifts, but to be them. I thought inheritance was what you receive. It turned out, it's what you give when you stop fearing it will be taken from you." He put the sheet into the drawer next to the star, and he understood one simple thing that always slips away because the noise of the world is loud. Happiness does not arrive like a courier pressing a doorbell. It is like a kettle you put on yourself. You need to hear it in time to turn it off, and to pour for someone beside you. On the bank stood Lily, looking at the water, where the lamps reflected like signals from a distant summer. She raised her eyes. "So, Captain, where next?" "Next is a good direction," Oliver said. "Shall we go together?" "Together," she replied, and it was perhaps the best of all the gifts he had received that year. And Elsie's star slid gently sideways, scraping its hull softly against the neighbor boat, as if it smiled, in the old way, in Elsie's way. Beside them stood those who knew how to cut kindly and to shine quietly. And London, suddenly, for a second, seemed not a city but a room, with a kettle that had just sung its simple, truthful aria.